all from Taiko and Drums. Taiko, but what about Drums and Rums? Well, the word Taiko is drums in Japanese. And at this podcast, this episode, we are live on location in a Taiko drum studio, Ronin Taiko, here in Oakland Park, Florida. And I'm here with the instructors at the dojo and school where they teach Taiko drums. And I'd like to introduce on the podcast, Marina. How you doing, Marina?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. So thank you for inviting me down to the studio, right? As now that the pandemic's starting to kind of settle out, right? People are okay being together and not social distance in Zoom. I hated Zoom. So
it's hard to drum with Zoom.
Yeah, yes. So when I had reached out to everybody for the podcast and then ideas, right? I think this is kind of what being on location, right?
Yeah.
At a person or the guests, whether it's their business, a studio, a distillery, or wherever that may be, and because that's what you get to tell more of the story.
Right.
Right. You can't get that from Zoom.
Not very well. You
Right.
could manufacture your background and such, but this is the real.
Exactly. And where else could we could be any cooler than look at these drums here, right? Which we're going to talk a lot about here.
All virtual here.
Yes.
This is all fake. This is all manufactured.
This is all green screen here.
That's right.
Yeah. So, okay, educate me again. I'm learning for the first time here as well. The listeners and the viewers, what is going on here? Okay,
Sure.
what is obviously the school? What is Ronin Taiko? How did you get into it? Tell me the whole story, and maybe I'll interject every so often.
Well, certainly,
Okay.
certainly. Well, obviously, you'll see that there's a certain variety of drums in all sorts of different sizes and shapes. In Japan, the drum serves a very important part of its history and part of its culture. It's been played for a very, very long time, both in religious ceremonies, to celebrate great harvest, and also during wartime. Each drum is played in a different way because of that theater as well. So rather recently, in the whole scheme of Japanese history, as early as the 1950s, the idea of playing the drums in a group similar to this, and with others as well, became an idea really brought on by a jazz musician of all things.
Really?
And this old, beautiful style of drumming now became enhanced with a little bit of a modern touch, and that's what current Taiko is most popularly known for.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned there the jazz connection there. So was it something that somebody had kind of came across on a travel to Japan, or
I believe it was a Japanese person who studied jazz who saw the possibilities of using Taiko in more than just a single drum played in a single way, which it makes absolutely incredible sounds on its own.
Right.
The idea of playing different drums, playing with different sounds and pitches, is really a different way of looking at it, and playing it with a group as well certainly added a lot more gravitas, let's just say, to the drumming, and it has helped it to continue to evolve to this day.
All right, so all my jazz alums who've been on the podcast who play jazz, okay, we need something going on here with our cross
That'd be great.
pollination here. So we've got some really good guests who have been on. So again, it's even though we talk about drums and most of the familiarity that most people have are drum kit, maybe have a little bit familiar with some hand drums, or even mostly we're here in South Florida, steel drums, right? But this is a little different, and this is very unique. So where this is not something that you're going to buy from Sweetwater, right, or Guitar Center, right?
You can't get it at Amazon that easily. No, not something you can order.
Even with Prime?
Not even with Prime, I think you would have a bit of a difficulty. But you never know. By next week, they'll be available. These drums, you have a choice. You can either make them yourself, which is quite an endeavor, and Sensei Roy, actually, he makes a lot of the drums himself, which is quite remarkable, because it's not just getting a cask and putting a skin on it. There's a whole procedure involved. There are several people throughout the United States that do build them. Most of them are in the Pacific Northwest. And also, of course, you could go to Japan and get them. Now, if if you're doing that, that's quite a purchase because they tend to use an entire trunk of a tree and hollow it out. So you're getting a solid piece of wood, and the leather that they use in order to play these drums on is the highest grade leather. So this, you get the leather in your shop, you're not going to necessarily choose this particular leather to upholster your car. The top leather items will go straight to the drums first. Now that of course is going to accrue the price, so if you think about a relatively small drum that you'd like to bring from Japan, you're looking definitely several $1,000s in order to purchase that drum alone. So it's usually easier for us to get them locally. And by locally, it's within the United States. But it all depends on what sound you want and what type of drums. You can see there's so many different types that you have a lot of choices based on what you'd like to do.
So what kind of wood is typically used, right? Because that's a big drum kit kind of thing too, right? It's birch or maple. Or
Oak tends to be the most popular here as far as the United States, and with the casts themselves, those are made of oak as well.
Okay.
With Japanese drums, it's the trees from within that region, so it could be just about, I don't know what in particular, white oak?
Ash.
Well, ash, thank you,
Okay.
yeah, there's several other, there's a variety of different types, but generally oak is the preferred.
Got it.
Yeah.
And you mentioned casks, and we were talking a little bit earlier, which was, again, very fascinating. Again, we've got a kind of a rummish reference, or at least a spirits reference here, right?
Absolutely.
Is some of them are actually made from whiskey barrels.
Correct, yeah. It's a really great way of recycling a whiskey barrel. You know, I find that to be rather fascinating, that you can go to a place, or even a vineyard, and find, you know, some of these things just kind of laying about, and you can, with a lot of work, you can put them together and actually build a pretty decent drum out of them. Yeah.
All right, so for all my distillers out there who've got stuff rum in the barrels, yes,
Please call us.
yes. Seriously though, it's maybe we'll talk offline on this. Let's get a barrel, let's get it here, and then you can have your very own. So yes, let's talk about that.
Yes.
Heard it here first. Yeah. So that's you know, again, very fascinating. You know, again, I know there's a lot of focus that we talk about the playing of the instruments and so forth, but it's the making of these instruments. I think it's fascinating.
I think that adds an increased connection between the performer and the drum itself. It's easy to take a drum for granted if you just grab one and get one. If you're building one, or if you're caring for your drum, much like, you know, you care for a precious instrument of any type, there's a different way in which you see it. So if somebody is being rough with it, you're going to protect it. And these drums are definitely not just significant to us as performers, but I think there's a general symbolism in the way that we play. We're representing what this particular performance style is. We're representing the people who have taught us in the past. We're representing the art form itself, and it's very important for us.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So going back to the foundation from Japan, where it originates, right?
Yeah.
So the style of the Taiko drumming, the culture, as you mentioned, certain reasons why the drums are played and so forth. But you know, how far back are we talking that, you know, that this kind of originated?
It could be, well, it's certainly hundreds of years. We could start with kabuki performances. We could start, of course, religious ceremonies where just a single drum was played in order to keep a certain cadence, a certain pacing, you know, in order to do certain ceremonies or saying prayers and things like that. When you had a great crop come in and everything's doing wonderfully, or you're celebrating someone's wedding, or anything, the opening of a store, you know, in Japan that actually is quite common. The idea of bringing drums in to celebrate is something that's very, not just commonplace, but it's expected.
Right.
And there's so many different styles in which to play. There's some that are very upbeat, the Matsuri style, which is very celebratory. It's mobile, it's lucid, everybody's moving about and partying. And then there's the more intensive pieces in which are played. For example, when we play these larger drums, there's a little bit more intensity involved in, and well, you know, it all depends on which piece is being, you know, performed. But for the most part, we like to make it a very good, heavy, you know, strong piece. It helps to inspire. Sometimes people would play drums during wartime, for example, in order to get the people going, get those soldiers all psyched up and ready to go. Same thing with, you know, the night before. We're having a big party. party. We're going to do this. So it's this last day, man. We never know if we're going to come back. But we're having a really great celebration in order to do that. It could also be very light for a dance performance, a nice, lovely, light one. It's quite amazing to see the range of different kinds of performances that take place with these drums.
That's, yeah. There's drumming is very primal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And as we were talking earlier, was very, we have a heartbeat, so there's always something. We're beating always inside, right?
Always. There's always a rhythm somewhere, and there's always a rhythm to be found in speech, in music, in everything. And I think the drum is a great symbol of it in many ways, and everybody feels very comfortable around a drum because of that.
Right. So, talk about some of the physical aspects of playing these drums.
Well, it all depends on which drum you're playing, naturally. For example, these kit drums or this kit setup, this is what we would kind of call a kit, speed is important, which means you need strength. And by speed, I mean you need to be able to calculate in your head how long it takes for you to strike this particular skin before you strike the next skin, keeping on rhythm, making sure that everybody else is on rhythm with you. You're kind of like the lead in charge right here. So I think that's a major part, that dexterity and that hand-to-eye coordination, or to be able to hit each particular drum. They're all making a different sound. You've got a higher sound here, you've got a lower sound here. So you need to, rather much like a drum kit in general, you need to know what exactly you want to do to get that sound going. And then of course, coordinating it with the larger drum, which has this very droning, very strong beat, but it's also dominating. How to be able to play these different things together so they're synchronous.
So is there, when you're playing certain pieces, which we'll talk about here in a little bit more about the pieces in a moment, but is there, like a drum kit player, is there any, are you playing to a click? Is there time signatures to this style of?
That is a really good question. And it, honestly, when we drum, it perplexes a lot of drummers because we don't follow exactly the same kind of rhythm structure that they're familiar with in a lot of aspects. Yeah, there's the 4 counts and the 16s and all that, but it's not done in that same way. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's never really done that way. In fact, there are a lot of strange pauses that occur during these pieces that we know as ma. It's kind of an open space. And that's not a space that you count. It's a space that you feel. And the only way that you can play with another person in that way is by practicing enough that you feel each other's vibes. So you're going 1, 2, 3, 4, huh? Oh, that's not a count.
Oh, okay.
And that's usually where the drummers go, what? How did that? Hey! It's
right, because
really
the rest note in traditional drumming is a part of the beat.
Yeah,
right, the
exactly.
count, right? Yeah.
In this case, it could be very long. It could be as long as we want it to be, as long as we all know that we're going to all hit at the same time. And I think that's personally my favorite part of playing this style, is that it really keeps the audience guessing. And the only ones who aren't guessing are us, because we've been doing it so much. And we have to, or else we're not going to link up. We're not going to sing.
That's interesting, because those rest and those pauses in music in general, or breaks, is there's always, it makes the listener very uncomfortable, right? And it, I guess in the same sense, but there's not
suspenseful, right?
Yeah, suspense, right? Yeah. So
auditory suspense.
Yeah. So some of the music, I guess, how is it? Are you typically playing? I guess we'll just call it, for the intents terms, and you can correct me if there's a better terminology for it, is covers and originals, So, okay. Again, you tell me what the proper term is.
Well, when we first started training, we did learn pieces. There are traditional pieces that come from Japan that you do learn, specific rhythms. There's some rhythms that are meant for dance that are meant to be repeated over and over, and the dancers move over and over with it, which is really lovely. There are other pieces that are recognizable that may be for a different kind of a ceremony or different kind of a setup. We've learned those, and we've learned those with senseis. That would help us a great deal with it. But then at some point, by their own encouragement, they would even ask, you should do your own thing. And which is really fantastic, because it's suddenly the master's telling you, have at it, man. And it really feels great to be able to start experimenting. We're really lucky. Roy Anderson, who's sensei here at the Keiko, we call it a Keiko, it's like a theatrical dojo, so to speak. he's written these pieces, and we've worked along to continue to evolve with these pieces and make them grow. We can adjust them however we need to, and it's been quite a journey so far. The pieces are always being played over and over, and this year it sounds different than it did last year, than it will 5 years from now. That evolution is pretty fantastic.
That's, yeah, and like I said, is to be able to. Everybody always likes to create their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to,
Yeah.
to be at that level that
Right.
you know given, or I don't know, given permission or whatever. You know,
It's-
yeah.
I guess it all depends. We're very particular. We want to make sure that we respect the people who we trained under, and we also want to embody the culture as most respectfully as possible. So we always check after a certain period of time when they say, please, and they encourage us to go a little further. We're always happy to do it, but only upon their encouragement. Everybody has a different way of doing it, though, and we certainly appreciate other people's expression in Taiko. But we're a little old school in the way that we like to respect our senseis and do it that way. But we also really appreciate the freedoms that we have in order to be able to play and experiment and do things a little differently.
Yeah, it's I wish I remember. I saw this quote last night from Socrates. It was a Socrates quote.
Mm.
You know, talk about change. How basically don't fight the old. Change with the new. You know, something like don't fight, but yet kind of.
It's like a go with the flow kind of thing, right?
Yeah. So, so you talked about the school here. You talked about Sensei Roy. So, when did the school open up, and then how did?
Yeah.
And I guess also after that is, how's it been accepted by those who are Asian, Japanese Americans or Japanese folks that are? Is there kind of a?
It's a good question. Actually, well, we started this group in particular. We've been training for some time previously. We were actually inspired by another group that we had seen perform, and when we went out on our own, that was approximately 2006 when we started doing it. We created the Academy, and we wanted to do it in order to perpetuate the art form a little further. We also had a different idea on how to train. We wanted to train a little more intensively. We're very physical folk, so we thought, well, and the great thing about Taiko is that you can play a very physical manner, or you can play lightly as well. You have choices. We like the physical stuff, and we were really influenced by a group in Japan by the name of Asakagumi. That is remarkable. Those guys, when they play, you just can't take your eyes off them. It's just solid muscle and strength and power, and that was the style that we wished to learn. And we were really super fortunate to be able to connect with the group. Talk about a mind scramble. Not only that, we even got to perform on stage with several of the members a few years back, which still, I'm pinching myself on that experience. But we founded the group back in 2006 in an effort to continue to perpetuate this art form and make it accessible to others. And the Academy started a few years after. We eventually wound up moving into here and continuing building more drums, building more facilities and access for people, and we've got a pretty nice thing going so far.
So how would somebody watching this or listening get involved and want to learn?
Well, it depends where you live. I think there's definitely a lot more access to this style of drumming on the West Coast, a larger Asian population. On the East Coast, there are not as many, but there are a few, and there are at least 3 here in Florida. As you go further north, you might find a few peppered around. Reaching out on the internet, there are lots of Taiko groups that you can get some suggestions and some advice from, workshops and things like that. So it's certainly doable, but yeah, it really does depend on the region.
Right. And here in South Florida, we have, I guess, and again, I'm terrible because I wasn't born in Florida, so I don't know all the history, but I do know that we do have the Murakami Gardens. There is a
Correct.
Japanese influence in the area,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, it's a museum in Japanese gardens. It's absolutely beautiful, and we do perform there quite often. We go and do the Hatsume Festival, which is in springtime. We usually do that every year. COVID put a little kibosh on it for the past couple of years. We're looking forward to returning when that festival does come back. And we play outdoors. It's just a beautiful, large festival in the best setting you can imagine because you feel like you're in Japan, which is phenomenal. Of course, when you're on the other coast, they're everywhere, and it's fantastic. You can go over to Little Tokyo and boom, there it is. There's a group right there in the corner, and we're just ecstatic to see as many as that. And maybe at some point that'll happen here too. We're definitely performing a lot down here. We'll do shows in Miami, West Palm, and just go all around. We've even done tiki events, which is very relevant to your rum.
That's right. So so talking about the Murakami so how outside of obviously here in the U.S.
Yes.
has it been accepted for non?
Well, what's funny is that the ones who have the hardest time noticing that we're not Japanese are usually non-Japanese people. Japanese, for the most part, are very welcoming of us playing, and in Japan, it's even more so because it's new and exciting to see us playing. Where and you still have to rather prove yourself in any respect as a musician.
Right.
That would be important. But I think most of the things that we get, most of the input that we get from people being surprised that we're not Japanese, are usually from non-Japanese people. The Japanese usually will nod their heads and acknowledge it a lot easier, which we appreciate because we can't help not being Japanese. We can do as much as we can as far as working as performers, but genetically we can't do anything. We can't do much about genetics, but we'll certainly try our best to represent the culture as best as we can.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's accepting for sometimes for folks, people, whatever the generalization is, can be very protective of their cultures and things.
Sometimes, yeah. I think when they see, definitely it helps to see that if another group that is obviously not of your culture is really working very hard to represent it as best possible and is being respectful, great. As a person, I'm a Puerto Rican woman. I've seen Japanese play salsa music. There's one of my favorite bands is a Japanese group, and they're unbelievable. Are you kidding me? I'd rather watch them than a lot of locals, just because they put in the time and they have that love for it. I think it's more important to have dedication and love for it rather than you can be born into it, but that's not going to help you become a better drummer or a better dancer or whatever the instance is. It's great that you have that in your blood, but the blood only flows. You have to practice and you have to work at it and have a love for it.
Right.
So I appreciate it in all respects. If you find a person that has the whole thing, great, that's the whole deal. But especially how the world's getting smaller and smaller, I think watching also how this style of drumming has continued to expand and evolve. We're seeing it in pop culture everywhere. So it already was kind of in the background, but now you're starting to see it more prevalent. In fact, rather recently I saw an ad, one of those advertisements for a Star Wars series or a movie or something. I believe it's a series, and it had an alien playing, really for all intents and purposes, a taiko. We're staring at it going, that's amazing. That now it's even gone there. And you'd be really surprised how often you'll hear these drums being played in musical scores, and movie scores, and everything. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, because there's no other type of drum that makes that sound, right?
It has a really distinct sound, yes.
Right.
And because of the sizes of these drums, it's really hard to imitate. You can't use a keyboard. You can't play it on your Casio. You can't sample it that easy.
So the sticks there, they're not normal drumsticks.
No, they're not. These are known as bachi. They come in different sizes depending on the drums played. For example, this kit here, these bachi are more appropriate for that. For an odaiko like that, bachi are larger. We also have others that are almost, they look like little pestles,
Okay.
Those are made to be played in yetai position, which is the seated position. We play in a different one. Thin ones for shime daiko, thinner ones for okedo taikos, which are the ones that you carry, that kind of thing. So really, there are a lot of different types, but generally, also that's a matter of taste. We like theatrical. We're very theatrical in our style, so we rather have larger bachi, larger sticks, so that you can see them. So when we play, you actually see where everything's going. It adds to the dramatics of the performance.
So And so there's none of the drums are played by hand?
We have no hand drums here.
Okay.
And sometimes we need to explain to folks that they'll want to do it. Right?
Yeah,
I think
right.
bongos.
Bongos,
And understandable, but we explain that the oils in a hand may not be the best thing for the skins. Sure, the skins can take it for a while, but if given a choice, we'd rather just play them with the six and avoid the hands altogether. But they're tough skins; they can handle quite a bit.
So what are the skins typically made of?
Well, these here are cowhide. Sorry, PETA. But they are. The Shimedaigo also is cowhide, but this in particular, they tend to be horse. There are some synthetic hides also that are used. They're very long lasting, and if you look, for example, at this drum here, this right there, that's actually the spine of the bovine that was used, the large bovine.
That was a big cow.
Yeah, the skins they do last quite a while, and I think that's also a point of reverence. When we play, we respect that something living was here.
Right.
It's something that we don't take for granted. In fact, it is said that in Japan, some folks will have their family cow or something like that, and if it passes away, they may make a drum out of it, and if they do, it's a very respected drum because people love it.
Right. It's and the part of that culture tie is, as you mentioned, there's a spiritual aspect in that part of the culture there. So this one has a name, right?
No, we don't name our drums. We
Okay.
just call them the drums.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry. I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I thought this is Charlie.
No. Charlie the cow. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, these are known as Odaiko is generally the term for a very large drum, and it's also O is an honorific term. So whenever we play the larger drums, we tend to say Odaiko. That's what
Okay.
That's Odaiko. They're two different, as you can see, these are two very different styles. Even though they're large drums and they're both quite heavy, they're constructed differently. This one is much denser and heavier, even though it's smaller as far as length. This one being larger, but it's a rope drum and it's easier to carry. About 5 people, 6 people it takes to carry this bad boy. And this one, maybe about the same, but a lot easier. You can see it's lifted and lowered a little bit easier just because it's a lighter.
So what's the dimensions on what we're looking at here?
Oh gosh, I'm really bad with numbers, so I cannot tell you. But we'll have to get back to that.
We'll pop it up on the screen when we do our post.
Yeah, please. Yeah, 4 carry the 6. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure.
There's geometry involved.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I just play them.
So once we're done here with the podcast, you're going to show. Give me a little.
Yeah, we're going to do a little demo. I'm going to have Sensei joining me. It's always good to have a backup person on the line to play. I'll be playing the Odaiko in this particular instance. We have several different pieces that we like to play. This is one of our signature pieces, which we call echoes, and that's generally what most of our students learn first. Is part of the rhythms of this. This is the big one, and it's a rather relevant one to us because it's about going into battle, but any kind of battle. So we're not talking about war necessarily. It could be just your own personal struggles, or it can be something that you're nervous about, or whatever. It's a get up and go kind of a piece, and it's very powerful.
So part of our celebration of Women's History Month, so it's obviously it's a very physical. You're, I guess what is the sense of empowerment or encouragement for our listeners or female listeners, part of the deal. What I guess want to share your thoughts.
Well, what's really interesting about this style of drumming is that surprisingly most of the drummers are female. A lot of them are. It's not something about strength 100%. A lot of it is about intensity and speed and discipline. So you'd be really surprised. You don't have to have these giant, muscular arms to play. It helps to have some muscle depending on the drum that you're playing. But I think there's so much variety with which to choose and which style you wish to play that it's inviting to just about any kind of person. But boy, there are some female groups that could blow your socks off. There's a group called Hono Odaiko, which is remarkable. Usually 3 women, and they are outstanding. And I believe they have pretty much set the bar for me as far as a taiko performer. If I ever could play in any way close to that caliber, I think I'm done. I think I'm good. I needn't do anything else.
No, that's great. So so we have a little segment, right? So again, this is a drum podcast now.
Yes, it
So
is.
yes, it is. So we have a little segment here called "In 4 Beats or Less." I know it's a little different here what we were just talking
All
about
right,
earlier.
I'm ready.
Right?
Let's see.
So, all right. So in 4 beats or less. Again, this may not. We'll see how this transfers,
Yeah,
right?
I'm intrigued.
So in 4 beats or less, who would be on your Mount Rushmore of drummers?
Oh my gosh.
I ask all the drummers this question, so
I gotta throw Neil in there.
okay.
Even though he's not a taiko drummer, but I'm sure he'd play the heck out of one.
I'm sure you'd find it very,
So he would be one. Sheila E. My goodness, what a woman! I admire and I've admired her all the time. Is it 5 of them? How many? How many?
It's excellent that you add. I just
4. Number. See?
Well. So I just our past this guest, Kira. She had asked her the question, and she said, "Well, wait, how many do I get?" I says, "I'm glad you asked because it's your Mount Rushmore."
Oh.
Now she was in the UK, so she was funny. I said, I'm glad you got the reference, because some guests that I've had that are not from the US are familiar.
Right.
What is Mount Rushmore? And I'm like, oh, okay, I totally screwed that whole thing up. But so it's your Mount Rushmore.
Okay,
It's
my own Mount Rushmore.
Marina's Mount Rushmore.
Okay, well.
So you got 2.
Okay, I got 2. Can I mention a group instead? Like, because they're all one. Because well, we're the exception, right? Asakagumi, that group, the way they work together, that's a solid organism. It's like a man o' war. It's a colony of drummers just boom, making one amazing. Yeah, so I would have to go with that as number 3. Tito Puente, because
Okay.
you got
That's
it.
right.
Gosh, so many. Dear. Sure, and my husband, Roy Anderson.
I would have shown Bono. I would have said instead of me. Get the lead out.
Actually, Roy is an amazing drummer. So yeah, I'd have to put him in, and not just because I'm biased, but he's outstanding. You'll
Yep.
soon see that.
I can't
You
wait.
will.
Yes. So okay, all right. That's pretty good. That's
Yeah.
pretty good. Very different inspirations or from different genres too.
Yeah, exactly. I like people's passion. So
Right.
watching these drummers performing is the reason why I do what I do. And Hono Odaiko, of course, being another example. I didn't even bring them up. Well, I did earlier, but for the Rushmore, throw them in there too, because they're all of them play with a very specific intensity, and that's what I admire. They're show people as well as drummers, and that is something that I always seek out in sitting and watching a drummer play. You can just watch them play, but you want to actually get a performance out of it, just sitting there and watching Tommy Lee spinning around. Just everything. Every drummer has something. You want to stare at them. Dave Grohl. They all have these fantastic, unique traits that you want to watch them as drummers.
Right.
And I think that's my springboard as to who I throw in my Rushmore. Now my Rushmore's gotten way too large. That's a very large mountain now.
I think we're gonna need a bigger mountain.
We do. So we get the carvers and got a lot more work to do.
In 4 beats or less, what is something that most people don't know about you?
Oh.
Or I guess will now.
Most people don't know. Oh golly, I'm an open book. This is terrible.
Or I guess would be surprised. How about that? Surprise?
Surprise. Yeah. Well, okay. People that don't know me would be surprised. That kind of a thing.
They're watching this.
All right. So some of you know me, so you won't be surprised. But those that don't know me, well, we live in a house with a hairless dog, it's a Sholo Squinkly, and we also have 4 boa constrictors and several tarantulas and carpet python. I'm part of a reptile. It's an exotic pet amnesty program. So whenever anybody has a very large snake that they need to house and they don't have a place to keep it, I take it in. So I have a background in working with primates and bats way back when.
Herpetologist.
Herpetology, yes. And I also, I'm studying the bats as well. So, yeah. I guess that would be one, among others. Pilot, wing walker. There's too many.
I know.
It all sounds like Baron Munchausen speaking.
We may have to do another podcast, yes, for sure. Yes, always. But I think, I think real quick is for those that are watching or listening to this, as you said there, I think that's really great because for those of you who don't know that live here in Florida or South Florida even, we have a huge problem with large snakes that are not native, right? That's true. Right? So a lot of people get them as a pet or go to the event convention that they have here, and it's all cool. And then once they realize that they have to start feeding them larger than rodents, then
it gets out of hand. And people think that because they live in the subtropics, they can just drop them off. And I'll think, oh yeah, they do. They do very well, really well, breeding everywhere well. Boa constrictors can still be kept, though. I believe all larger pythons, reticulated, Burmese, any of those usually have to be euthanized if they're caught in the wild. But unless you've been grandfathered in, having the snakes before the laws came to play. But boa constrictors are still open, but a lot of people don't want to keep the big ones, so that's my job. And I'm a snake wrangler part-time, and obviously I also do underwater performances too. So a little bit of everything.
I see like a TV show I discovered too.
Oh.
The Snake Wrangler. Well, we did have there was a show, right? Anyway, so all right, so in 4 beats or less, again, I want to ask this question, but try to be respectful too. So of this of Taiko and culture.
Trace myself.
What kind of Spinal Tap moments have you had before?
We've had little Stonehenge. We've had difficulties finding locations, going backstage and trying to find. Yeah, stages never quite being what we expect. Things breaking down. Yeah, but typical. It's still a performance. It's still music, and it's still live. So yeah, just as many mistakes can happen.
So there's no difference in whether it's Taiko drum or whether it's a 4-piece band.
That's right. We've had strange people show up and start dancing in front of us when we drum. We've had that happen. Yeah, we've had that happen more times than we wish to admit. I would be way more amused had it been like what happened in Spinal Tap, but we'll take people from South Beach enjoying themselves too. That's fine.
Everything goes to 11.
Yeah. That's it. Everything. Yeah, this is all 11. All of it.
All right, and last question here. In 4 beats or less, where, and as we talked a little bit about the tiki, where is your favorite tiki place?
That is a hard question to answer because each tiki bar is very unique.
Now this isn't the Mount Rushmore question.
This is different. Yes. I moved here to Fort Lauderdale to work at the Maikai, and I performed at the Maikai. I was one of the Maikai Islanders in the review for 3 years. I love that place, yes, and I understand why the tiki folk call it Mecca. So, and as Maikai is trying to rebuild itself at this point and trying to get things going again, I think my allegiance will be to the Maikai because of my history with it. So I'm very loyal to it. But I absolutely love all tiki bars because of their uniqueness. I'm connected to the Maikai. The umbilical cord is always there, and that's my alma mater. So I'll have to go with the Maikai.
Okay, all right, that's fair. That's a good answer. So.
Yeah.
All right, so before we wrap up, what would you want to? I guess we call it, for lack of a better term, shameless plugs. What do you want people to check out? Where do you want people to buy and download your music?
Yay.
Whatever it may be.
Well, we're Ronin Taiko and Taiko Academy, so it's both together. We do performances at Asian festivals. Theatrical performances are usually our big thing. We've done performances at the Broward Center for the Performing Arts. Lots of different Asian festivals throughout the East and West Coast. We have performed at Tiki events, Tiki Con, and Tiki Fever, of course, over here. It's been pretty fantastic that we've done all these. I'm trying to think here.
Website or anything?
Well, oh yeah, of course, yeah. RoninTaiko.com is obviously where you can find us. And we'll be performing this weekend. I don't know how soon this is playing or being broadcast, but we'll be performing this weekend. First we'll be at the Flamingo Gardens on Saturday, and then on Sunday we'll be performing in Coral Springs, Festival for the Arts. So we'll be out live.
And then what about maybe the following week? You have anything?
I think we'll be just doing classes at that point.
Okay.
A lot of classes. We do have several classes throughout the week, and we have everyone's invited to perform and learn these drums. Eventually, some folks actually join us on stage, which is really fantastic to see them go from just beginners to stage performers. And we perform sometimes in front of thousands. It's really trippy and an honor.
Yes. Okay, so one last thing here before we put a bow in this here. So what we have is, now that we've made it through the podcast,
Oh.
all right, I would like to welcome you, Marina, to the
Oh,
alum.
I earned a shirt.
You earned your shirt. We made it through the show here.
Oh, here we go. Ta-da!
There you go.
This is brilliant. Thank
Yes.
you.
So
Oh,
you're
I
now
like
part of
this.
the alum, where we've had drummers, Jim Riley from Rascal Flatts. We've had
Oh.
Dorothea Taylor, the grandmother drummer. You've seen some of her videos. We just had so got a great group of alums. And again, I always try to want to tie all the alums back together, right?
This is
And
great.
kind of help promote or get things out there. Tag me on stuff, and I'll reshare it and so forth. And again, keep up, and see what's going on, and kind of.
Well, this is
bring
a
her- bring her
terrific
little
honor.
community. Yes,
I'm
yes.
glad to be among such great company.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, all right. So again, we're going to go ahead, and we're still going to record some stuff here. We're going to wrap the podcast portion up here, but we're still going to take some video here for the YouTube. So if you're listening to this, you'll listen to the YouTube following Sunday after this podcast will drop a week from today,
Okay.
and then whatever 7. I don't know. We're doing math again. I don't know. So is
So
whatever the
difficult.
podcast drops, and then we'll just stay tuned. Follow us on
Yeah.
all the social medias.
Yes, please.
Give us a rate, review, subscribe, all that stuff that we say at the end of all the stuff to help us to get more content out there for folks. And again, this is exactly why we didn't want to do this on Zoom. This is not a Zoom
This
podcast.
is not Zoom worthy. This has to be much larger.
In person, right? This is live, not Memorex. So again, my name is Paul Robertson.
That's all.
I thank you all for tuning in and listening to this podcast. Thank you, Marina, for coming on.
Oh, it's a
And thank you for the
pleasure.
invite to come
Oh.
on down.
Thanks for coming.
Yes. So, all right, all. Have a great day.
All
Talk
right.
to y'all. Thanks.